So thanks for joining us for today's session. Now, the agenda for the next hour, and if we finish 10 minutes early, that's absolutely fine. If we go over 5 or 10 minutes, that's absolutely fine as well. Our agenda today is to do a little bit of a recap on Gatsby Benchmarks and what good looks like, a little bit about getting started with an activities, picking an objective, gauging knowledge of young people, some top tips, a little bit around pre-work and post-session evaluation and post-work, and a little bit of a focus on the impact for you. Now, we had a long discussion about this session before we did it, and actually, I kind of want to caveat this session with a little bit of employers working with schools and colleges is always good. It's great that you can volunteer your time to do stuff to inspire the next generation. And the idea of this session really is more of what's a gold standard, what's a best practice, what looks good around engagement with schools and colleges, and what's the best thing to do. Is it worth going in and doing a talk for a whole year group? Does that go? Does that fall on deaf ears, or does that have an impact? Is it worth doing a mentoring session? We're going to cover all them different things and maybe give you some things to think about as well. So taking a step back, because I do feel like a lot of these sessions, we are kind of sitting in the middle of education and business. And whether we like it or not, we do speak two different languages. If you are not au fait with the Gatsby benchmarks, this is how schools measure their career programme, and the careers lead in the school has to update where they are as a school, kind of like a KPI really, around these 8 benchmarks. And this happens all across the country with enterprise coordinators who are going into our schools, working with our careers advisors, and the benchmarks are focused around this. Now, I've put all 8 up, but you just kind of so you know, and I do want to highlight as well, we'll send out a link to, on the Careers Hub website, we've got a nice Gatsby benchmark overview. And because this is education speak, really, this is not employer speak. But what's relevant to employers in Gatsby benchmarks is 2, 4, 5, and 6. So we can help support our schools hit their Gatsby benchmarks, we as employers, for these 4 benchmarks really. We can help them learn from careers and labour market information. So if you know information about your sector when you're delivering something, if you can pass that information on, that helps support Gatsby benchmark 2 for that school. Gatsby benchmark 4 is linking curriculum to careers, which I don't know whether you can have a favourite benchmark. I don't know whether that's a thing, but there's something for me about learners understanding the point of studying whatever they're studying and linking it to their career destination, which is absolute gold. That idea is if you're good at maths and physics, they're actually really good traits to becoming an engineer. It's kind of linking the subjects to the destination for me. Not, oh, well, if I do physics, I could be a physics teacher, because young people sometimes need their mind expanding, and our teachers maybe need to kind of think a little bit about outside the box. For careers, they probably don't even realise that are out there. And we've been doing some amazing work with a group of games studios, and we've learned loads around what's applicable in game studios, and it's not what you think. I could talk about that. That's a hot topic at the moment. Gatsby benchmark 5 and 6 sound similar, but do have distinguishing features. 5 is encounters with employers and employees, and 6 is experience of workplaces. And we're going to cover experience of workplaces as well in a little bit more depth as we go through this. I've expanded out Gatsby Benchmark 5 and 6 because when schools are measuring themselves on the benchmarks, we kind of need to know what good looks like. So I'm just going to read this one out. In Benchmark 5, they want every year from the age of 11, pupils should participate in one meaningful encounter with an employer. So from year 7, so that's old first year, in old money secondary school, pupils should participate in at least one thing with an employer. And every year alongside their study programme, students in colleges should participate in 2 meaningful encounters with an employer. And one encounter should be delivered through curriculum, so that link with careers and curriculum. Meaningful encounter, because that's quite an open phrase, is one where the student has the opportunity to learn about what work is like or what it takes to be successful in the workplace. So that kind of covers what a school is expected to get a good mark around Gatsby Benchmark 5. And the idea of telling you this as employers is our teachers are looking out for activities that will help support their benchmarks as they kind of go through the year. Benchmark 6, what good looks like is every student should have first-hand experience of the workplace. Now, through work visits, work shadowing, or work experience to help the exploration of career opportunities to expand their networks. Now, post-COVID especially, experiences like the old-fashioned work experience where you go make the tea or do the shredding it has never had a really big impact for young people, and especially with the kind of expansion into digital interviews and digital expectations on young people, that good when it comes to work experience has changed a little bit. We need to make sure when we're kind of checking for benchmark 6 that the outcomes are defined. So based on the kind of age and needs of the students. So if you're doing something for year 7, which would be like 11-year-olds, that would be quite different. Your learning outcome for year 7s would be quite different for somebody in year 11 who are like 15, 16 taking their GCSEs. The idea is that students meet a range of people from the workplace. So the idea that a workplace is not just one person, it can be a team of people, and that there's extensive two-way interaction between the students and the employers. One of the key bits for experience of the workplace as well is this idea that students must perform a task or produce a piece of work relevant. And I think if you're not sure on how to support or deliver work experience, we can definitely help you with that and the kind of wraparound support with what that takes. So that was a whistle stop around benchmarks. I'm going to kind of hand over to Gemma now, just so you don't get bored of me too much, because I know I do have a tendency to take over at these sessions. I'm going to jump on the chat as well. I know that sounds like quite educational heavy, but I think it's really important for us to, as employers, to understand what our teachers and our schools' KPIs are as well. Over to you, Gemma.
Thank you, Michelle. As Michelle said, I think it just really helps to set the scene for us that if a teacher is asking us for a specific thing or asking us to do a specific thing, that we understand kind of why they're asking. You might be going, why are they asking me to do that? That's quite strange. Or why are they phrasing it that way? It just kind of helps you to understand why they might be doing that. And what I just wanted to cover next, now that we've done that kind of general overview, I suppose, is talking a little bit more about the different types of activities that you might take part in as businesses and employers, and what they sort of mean for the young people. Before I start this, and before I kind of go on to my next slide as well, is that I'm going to caveat this, and we've already, I suppose, said this at the beginning, that any interaction with a young person is a valuable one. That is something that comes out of all the research. So really, it doesn't matter if you can only kind of give an hour at a careers fair, you are still going to be making that that impact. It's just that some projects and programs that you might be able to do are known to have a bit of bigger impact, or we're able to measure that impact over longer periods of time, which is obviously really helpful and beneficial for the students. So especially as Liverpool City Region employers, you might already be on the Given Hour email list, so you might see all the different types of activities and things that teachers are asking for. There's a big range, and I suppose I've kind of separated them off into one-off engagements with schools and young people. So that's things like careers fairs, mock interviews, presentations, that sort of thing. All very valuable activities, but usually shorter, less sustained engagements. Then what we have is lots of opportunities for mentoring, for work experience, which is obviously the difficult one for a lot of people to kind of set up and do. You might do things like project setting. So for example, going into a school, saying to them, I want, here's some background information. I want you to come up with a product or a concept for me, and going back and visiting them at set points to see how they're getting on. Or you might do things like work experience or experiences of the workplace. Now, I've kind of caveated experience of the workplace with also things like hands-on activities as well. So if you're doing that throughout the day, then they can be really great, longer, more sustained engagements that students really enjoy. In terms of the types of activities that you take part in, there's lots and lots of different research out there, and it can be incredibly difficult to measure any sort of impact. We always say, how do you measure magic? It's nearly impossible. But there's lots of people that have produced lots and lots of different reports. I think it kind of makes sense that more sustained engagements, like the work experience, like the kind of project setting, the hands-on activities, have a higher impact. It's those repeat engagements that are helping you to build meaningful relationships with the students. But obviously they can be much harder to facilitate from an employer point of view. It's more time, it's a bit more effort. If you have to do site visits, that can be a nightmare. How do you get photo permissions if you're going to take photos? What's the health and safety aspects if you're taking people on site? And even things like project setting can take a lot of significant planning. So there is pros and cons to that there. The one-off engagements are obviously less time consuming. I've put in theory because they can be quite hard to coordinate internally or with schools, especially because quite often if you go to one, you'll get requests from the school to go to everyone after that. So it can be hard to whittle down what you're going to pick. You're also a bit limited on information sharing, but as I said, they can still be incredibly valuable for the young people. Education and Employers actually produced a report called Making the Grades, and they asked teachers what they thought was useful. And in general, they said that any interaction with an employer was going to increase their child's engagement or their kind of prospects in terms of employment. What they did say, and I think most teachers would probably echo this, was that they felt like the activity with the highest impact was that work experience based activity, which is a bit of a catch-22 because we know that that's the hardest thing for you guys to facilitate. They've all got their own benefits and restrictions, I suppose, and I really just wanted to flag this more so if you are just getting started and you're thinking, I've got X amount of time and there's so many requests out there, what am I going to pick to do? What am I going to focus in on? You want to, I suppose, if you've got that choice, be focusing in on those engagements that are going to get you the highest impact. Now, again, I'm not saying don't go to careers fairs, absolutely still do. There's lots and lots of requests and things out there. And if you can only give 2 hours to go to a careers fair, that is absolutely still valuable. The other thing that I'll say, and I don't want to go into detail too much about these, we mentioned them before, there's lots of different information out there. We could have an entire separate section on all the different organisations and schemes that are out there to help. If you've been to meetings before, you'll know the main 3 that I'm about to say, I suppose. So you can get help from the Given Hour campaign, which I have mentioned. You can sign up to that in the Liverpool City region. Jill's colleague, the lovely Charlotte, sends out a newsletter, I think once a month. And what that is teachers asking in theory for an hour of your time. It's usually more, I'll be honest. But it is a big list of all the different things that schools are looking for. Some of them are very specific, some of them are very broad brushstrokes. So actually, if you're thinking to yourself, I do want to make a long-term connection with a school, but that's not necessarily what they've asked for, you could still approach them and say what you've got to offer. There's also enterprise advisors, which are incredibly, incredibly valuable to our schools and young people. That is less hands-on with the actual students and more hands-on and strategic in terms of kind of senior leadership and helping them to build those business connections. So if that's something that you're interested in, then that's something we can put you in touch with the Careers Hub as well. Well, they're on the call today, so if you are interested or want to know more, pop your email in the chat. Another thing that's out there, and I suppose it's maybe a bit more specific to certain people who identify as being part of STEM. We do say that absolutely everything is STEM. I've yet to be told a job that doesn't involve some element of it. There is the STEM Ambassador Scheme, which is a nationally recognised scheme. Lots and lots of different projects and programmes come out of the STEM Ambassador Scheme as well. So things like Brightside Mentoring, which pairs you with a young person once a week to do those sorts of high impact engagement activities as well. There's also lots of organisations locally that do little bits and pieces. I've signed up to something called the Access Project, which is mentoring / tutoring. They've got a couple of schools in the Northwest, but also across the UK as well. There's people like Inspiring the Future, Education and Employers. There is loads of different things out there. And I think I just wanted to flag that, and that there's so much help and support. You don't ever need to go and reinvent the wheel. You've got us that you can speak to. You've got Jill and Mel that can lend a hand. There's lots and lots out there. So if you don't actually know how to get started, you don't know how to get going, there's all that support out there. And as I said, if you do want to chat with us separately about any enterprise advisors given our STEM ambassadors at all, please just give us a shout. So what I really wanted to do after we've kind of talked about the activities, so hopefully you'll have, if you haven't done one already, you might have an idea of where you want to get started. But one of the hardest things to do is actually getting it off the ground and knowing how to interact with those young people. Now, we have done further kind of training on this, kind of explain your job to an 8-year-old training previously, which went in a bit more depth. But one of the things that we find, particularly if you're doing short presentations, Q&As, that sort of thing, it can be quite hard to know how to get started and what to pick as the kind of general topic of what you're going to deliver to the young people, because you might not have that much time with them at all. So one of the things that we say, you've got lots and lots of information and it's often far too much to share in such a short space of time, and one of the hardest things can be picking, I suppose, what the interesting thing about you or the company is. What is that thing that you want to get across? So I've put an example there. Students will learn about careers in healthcare. It usually just needs to be a very broad objective. It will be based on the type of activity that you're doing, but it will really help you to structure your interaction and avoid that kind of element of information overload. You're also investing, but it's almost impossible to go into detail of every part of what you do as companies, as businesses, as people. So you have to extract that that important bit of information, and that might be because you want to dispel a stereotype, for example, or you want to introduce more girls into the sector that you work in. Whatever it is that you want to get out of that, have a little bit of a think. And I will say the activity that we're going to do is going to be based on doing some of this as well, just to give you a little bit of heads up. It will also help you to actually evaluate your impact. And when we kind of talk about that, I'm not even necessarily thinking big long sheets of impact evaluation. It can be as simple as doing a kind of show of hands and that sort of thing. And as I said, objectives should be simple, but you should also let the students that you're talking to know what your objective is, so that they are thinking about it and they can say at the end, well, she said I was going to learn about healthcare careers and I've still not got any idea, and they'll be able to do that little bit of feedback with you. And obviously I've just got this little this little example at the bottom here, as I said, if you worked in healthcare, for example, it might be that students will learn about careers in the healthcare industry, and then it would be easy to measure at the end of the session or the end of the talk that you're doing by asking students, okay, hands up, can any of you name 2 healthcare careers for me? And you're really getting that quick, simple feedback on what you've done. Right. Another really simple tip, I suppose, in getting started and helping to gauge kind of student knowledge is that idea of asking questions. So starting off with saying, you know, my name's Sarah, I can see you. My name's Sarah, and I'm here to talk to you about the games industry. I want you to be able to tell me 2 different types of gaming careers by the end of this session. Okay, hands up. How many of you can name a game studio in the Liverpool City region, and see how many hands go up. By the end of that, you should hopefully be able to ask them a similar question to kind of wrap up and see if more hands have went up. And it's just a really easy visual evaluation, especially in times where you might not have time to hand out, you know, a big piece of pre or post work that I'll talk about in a little bit as well. If you do any pre-work, and I'll talk about that in a minute, you can refer back to it and I'll show you some examples. But the main thing that comes from any of the kind of top tips that we give is don't assume any prior knowledge. And I think sometimes people do it without realising. So for example, saying you will all have played Minecraft. What it does is it's assuming prior knowledge, and students may not have played these things. They may not have Xboxes or PlayStations or that sort of thing, so you're already limiting your audience. But what it also does is immediately kind of close off that conversation. So it's much better to ask them questions like, have any of you played this? And really help to open up that kind of 2-way interaction. And as I said, I suppose I've touched on this already, asking a question that you've asked again, seeing if the number of hands has increased, and also asking for some examples of the things that you've mentioned. So if you say, can any of you name 2 careers in the games industry? If no hands go up, you might have to repeat some of the information or give some clarity. But if their hands going up and you can ask them to give examples, then that's fabulous. They've definitely learned or taken away that objective that you want them to. Okay, fabulous. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-work. So this is something that kind of comes under the Gatsby Benchmarks. One of the things that teachers have, especially with Gatsby Benchmark 5, which is that encounters with employers and employees, they've got their own sort of checklist that they will be working through to make sure that everything is in place for employers or employees coming to visit. And one of the things that it mentions is this pre-work idea. And I do have some examples on this slide and on some others as well. The idea of pre-work, I suppose, is it's making you set the scene for your interaction with those young people, and it's helping them to prepare for questions and ultimately just increasing the quality of your engagement. What I will say is it doesn't always need to be onerous. It can be quite simple. Now you'll see some different examples here. It can just be as simple as research this business. Can you answer 2 or 3 questions? Go and watch a video, come up with some questions that you might ask us. And obviously I will say as well that it has to be kind of age appropriate. You'll see one example here that I have. So this is from a session that we ran with STEM ambassadors, STEM volunteers. We asked the students before we came for them to draw as a scientist, a technologist, an engineer, a mathematician, whatever it was. And the idea was that the STEM ambassador we were taking along, her name is Amy. I haven't put her picture on the slides today just so she's not here, and it felt, I didn't ask her permission, so I didn't do that. But the idea is that Amy does not look anything like Albert Einstein. She is very normal looking, does not have crazy hair. She is an economist. She just wears normal clothes. She works in an office. It's very different to that idea of this stereotype that the students basically draw on Albert Einstein. There was some absolutely crazy examples. I think there was some really quite strange ideas of mathematicians and engineers in there as well. But really it's just helping the students to talk and to know that you're coming. One of the things that comes out of one of the reports that I read and prepared in this session, and that's the STEM Ambassadors report, They surveyed STEM ambassadors and asked them what they thought of interacting in these sorts of activities. And one of the things that they mentioned was that they quite often felt like the students weren't engaging because they just didn't understand why they were even there. They were just looking at them like, why are you here? And it became quite obvious that teachers hadn't set the scene, they hadn't explained why they were coming, so they were just listening to a talk and not engaging at all. So that is a very young, very simple example of the sort of pre-work that will get them talking. We've got a bit more details here that the lovely Mel has shared from the Careers Hub that they have done with Keep Remote Homes as part of their Creating Careers kind of lot of resources. You'll see here that it's a little bit more detailed. Now it is based off of videos that students have to go and watch, and you'll see that it asks them different questions that they obviously mention throughout the video. So it's really helping to keep them engaged, and it's really helped them to explore in a bit more detail what that company's doing. Now, as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be as detailed as that. You don't have to go off and do a whole video. It might be as simple as, can you research 3 products that we make and tell us what they are? Can you tell me 3 games that we make? Sorry, I've got 2 gaming people on the call, so it's going to keep being my example. Can you go and tell me how many, if there's a really easy fact that they can go off and find, for example. It doesn't always have to be incredibly detailed, but as I said, what it does help with is getting, especially pupils in secondary school and a bit older, is being able to be prepared with questions, because especially if you're setting that time aside, it can be quite difficult. And it can be probably one of the most awkward parts of the session is if you are waiting for those questions and there's just blank faces. So it's really just helping them to do that before you even get there. We've got another one as well for a student accountant. It's along the same lines, and you can see there that's asking them to do a bit of research and do it in their own words as well, and to think about some of the key terms as well as noted in there. So that's quite similar to the other one. The other thing that we've got that actually I've moved the slides about, so just bear with me, apologies, is this just a general skills audit for the students. Now this goes out before they go on to work experience, and you can literally just see it's as simple as asking them to rate the skills that they might need. Now this is just screenshots of some of them, there is some more in there, and it's the idea of this is that you don't actually even have to mark it. And I should have said this, it's not that you're going to be sitting marking 30 workbooks, it's that it's useful for the students themselves to be able to reflect on. So I'm hoping that the next slide is, yep, is this just general research question that's in there as well. So Liverpool City Region's made up of 44,000 businesses. Have a look at the growth sectors, explain what growth sector you're most interested in and why. So you can see that it can be quite general, and it's not something that you then have to go back and be like, 2 marks for this. You just say, have you done these questions? And not only does it help the students, but it would help the teachers as well in terms of setting the scene for your activity. I'm going to flick back for you. Apologies, I've put these in slightly wrong order. And we are going to do an activity ourselves. Now, we've got a little bit of, I could do breakout rooms, I think, what I will do. So hopefully Michelle and maybe Jill or Mel can man one of the breakout rooms for me. What I want you guys to have a think about is, if I'm setting the scene, you're asked to attend an event at a school where you will spend half a day with a group of 30 students. So it's not a full day, it's not quite a careers fair, you're going to be in the classroom with them. Have a little bit of a think about what you want them to get out of the session. So thinking about the objective that you might have, the stereotype you might want to dispel, whatever it is. What you might ask them to look at before you actually attend the session, and what sort of questions you might ask them to gauge their knowledge. So that's kind of thinking about the real world examples that you might be able to relate back to. So hopefully I'm not putting too much pressure on you all. Let me just set these breakout rooms. Let me just make sure I'll move you there. Fabulous. Okay, I'm going to hit go, and if you can pop into your breakout rooms, I will probably pop back in and out. I will make sure this slide is up as well, and we'll do that maybe for 10 minutes. Okay, and I can see Michelle down there, fab, brilliant. So I'm just going to ask, I suppose, Mel or Jill or Michelle, just to feedback and some of the, I suppose, interesting things that came out of the conversation. I did pop into each room, and there seems to be lots and lots of chat. We don't possibly have time to go through everyone's 1, 2, 3, but if we just, I suppose I'll start with you, Mel, because I can see you first.
Yeah, no problem.
Conversations would be brilliant to know.
Well, yeah, so there's a lot of good discussion in our groups. Obviously, in regards to the first question, we kind of said, well, it is age dependent on what you want. Obviously, the students to get out of it. The older years, you know, you want them to maybe think about you as a company and potentially them applying to you, you know, from a recruitment perspective. You know, maybe lower down years, you want to just let them know about the industry, what careers are out there. We also talked a lot about myth busting in certain industries. So a lot of, you know, busting stereotypes and challenging stereotypes, raising aspirations. And there was a few good examples as well around pre-work. Kevin had a good example of getting students to go on their website, and they've got quite a few mini videos explaining different careers, different roles, apprentices, and like their experience. So that was a really good research task that I thought, well, that would be a really good pre-work task. So maybe it wasn't originally framed as pre-work, but it probably would be really good. And in terms of questions, we kind of didn't get to that bit, but yeah, I think dependent.
Fab, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you've mentioned one of the things I suppose I wanted to say as well is that you've probably got something that you don't think in your head could be pre-work, or just something really, really simple as going on the website and having a look about can just help to set that scene. And it's nice that someone's already got a kind of example that they can pull on. And I think you're definitely right, absolutely. What you want them to get out of the session has to be age dependent. If you're still delivering the same thing to an 18-year-old as an 11-year-old, there's something going wrong there as well. So thank you, Mel. I'll hand over to Michelle as well.
Yeah, I apologise. I went completely off kilter with our group as well. But we said a lot of the very, very similar things to what Mel's just covered. Obviously the age dependent thing. One of the things I was talking about was around, you know, we are there to inspire young people, but you've got to start with your brand. We've got to make sure that people know who you are and where you're from, so that idea of just even hands up to gauge if anybody's ever heard of the organisation or understand where they're based as well. Because obviously Liverpool City Region's a big place. And your company might be local, or it might be national, or it might be a supply chain for other different things. I was saying we did some work for Scottish Power yesterday, and the presumption is Scottish Power only work in Scotland, which is not true. So Julie said some really great stuff about like working with the teacher as well, like using the teacher as the resource. And we had some discussion about using electronic things as well to do like quizzes pre and post. Sometimes they go down well. Sometimes they've had a few of them in the session. So yeah, echo what Mel said, and then a few extra things.
Brilliant. So hopefully we can just leave you guys, I suppose, just with these 3 things to think about for any of your kind of activities going forward. And it's funny, Michelle mentioned the kind of technology thing. One of the main things that we do is, before we do anything like that, is we ask the teacher if they're allowed to have their phones and things out, because you tend to find it varies quite a lot between schools. Some will let them, some won't. And if your whole session or your whole feedback is dependent on them scanning a QR code, you might not get any responses at all if they're not allowed their phones. So that's something definitely to consider. So I'm not going to take up too much of the rest of your time, hopefully. Just a little bit of notes on kind of post sessions. So being able to actually evaluate your activity and establish if the objectives have been met. And it can really be as simple as a kind of happy sheet. You might want to add something in to hand out to them, whether it is handing it out, scanning the QR code that says, can you tell me one thing that you've learnt today? That tends to be quite interesting, especially with younger students, and you'll find that the thing that they learn really isn't actually what you thought they were going to take away. One of the examples someone else has used before is that they done this with 10 to 11-year-olds year 6, and they very briefly mentioned poo in the session, and that was all the students had wrote about. So especially when you're in the kind of early stages, it might help you to gauge what they actually find interesting and what they are picking up. We done one actually with Amy, the economist, and I think she very briefly mentions turtles. Lots of mentions of turtles in that post evaluation, and it's not always a bad thing at all if it isn't exactly what you thought they were going to pick up. I suppose Michelle said that Julie mentioned this, always work in collaboration with the organiser, because they might be collecting their own feedback as well. If you can get one sheet that hits both kind of what you want and they want, and they can just share that with you, it's much easier. And I think that goes with setting the activity as well, setting the pre-work. They know their students, they know the level of their ability, and it's really vital that you kind of work together. It'll make it easier for you, it makes it easier for the teacher. So you can obviously do those little bits of just really standard evaluation. You can also do more in-depth kind of post-work. It can be reflective for the students, for example, and it can help continue their engagement. I'll show you one of the examples that we've got from the Liverpool City Region Careers Hub post-work. And as I said, I mentioned this about the pre-work as well, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you see or individually mark or provide feedback on. It can just be that reflective piece for the student. So this is taken from the post-work experience skills audit. It's essentially the same thing, but it helps the student to be able to pull out those things that they've learned during work experience and go back and go, well, this skill was amber before I'd done the work experience, and now it's green, and it's just that nice reflective log that's there for them. Fabulous. Okie doke, so I just wanted to briefly touch on this because we can talk about the impact on young people and teachers until the cows come home, but you know, we've mentioned this on other sessions. It's highly impactful for you guys to be able to take part in any of these kind of activities. I've got actual stats that I've put on here with real references. Things like increased communication, negotiation, adaptability, the ability to mentor others are all things that are seen from employees who take part in kind of volunteering and careers activities. It obviously supports your brand recognition. Michelle touched on that. It's really helpful, and particularly if you're a kind of lesser known company, whether it's in the region or just in general. The other thing that people have reported is actually increased productivity within their employees that take part in these volunteering schemes. So just in work more generally, it's improving. And again, we've got that kind of more obvious one, I suppose, that development of skills and talent pipeline. And that was reported by 4 out of 5 of the cornerstone employers in the CEC report recently. So it's so vital that we do it for our young people, but it's also really vital that you know that it's helping you as a business and it's helping your individuals as well. And even just things as it puts a smile on your face when you go in and you speak to the students and you see that light bulb moment. It's all really important. So I'm very conscious of maybe 5 minutes early, so it gives us a little bit of time just to do a little bit of chatting.
I'm gonna jump in and say I want in the chat, I'm demanding today one thing you've learned today. Let's do a little bit of post-evaluation. What's one thing that you've picked up on today that you make, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I might use that, or oh, that's something that needs to turn into an action. I'd really like it in the chat. If not, drop us an email, and we can make sure we can do some follow-up. We've got lots of very experienced people on the call. Really nice really, really nice stuff that Julie's put in the chat as well around neurodiversity and dyslexia friendly font. We will be doing sessions on inclusion as well, covering in the next in the masterclasses that are coming up. Amazing.
Thank you. Lots of lovely responses in there.
Collaboration is key, Mel. Yes, we're all about the collaboration. The pre-work to frame a session, yeah, it is important, and it definitely makes a difference. I do compare schools engagement sometimes to being like a stand-up comedian. Like, if your audience have not been warmed up before you get in front of them, you can fall flat on your face straight away. So that pre-work definitely gives them an idea of what is coming for them, and that work with the work with the teacher. The post-work as well. Gemma touched on something there. We've done sessions in the past where we've gone, right, we've got 2 minutes left, we're going to do our evaluation, see what you learned. And then the teacher's got an evaluation as well. So the kids are battered with 2 lots of evaluation. And you want them going away on a high. You don't want them going away going, oh, I've just had to fill in 2 forms. Because I'm pretty sure us as grown-ups, do we swerve evaluations? Do we always fill them in when they come in and goes, oh, it's proper, like, just making me go, oh, it'll only take 1 minute to fill. It never takes a minute to fill a form in, does it? But the power of the evaluation does help people with their impact. People have earned loads. That's so nice. And I think Jill has just actually summed that up in the chat. It makes the experiences meaningful. Without the pre and the post work, how do we know anything that we've done has gone in and made sense? Thank you all so much for your time on this wet and windy day. I'm working from my conservatory today, and it's very rainy, so I had to move. Very noisy. We'll probably hang on for about 5 minutes. Me, Gemma, Jill and Mel from the Careers Hub. We'll stop the recording now, but if anybody's got any questions, we'll send a follow-up, and the next lot of masterclasses and quarterlies will go in that follow-up meeting. If not, you are free to go or stay for chat for the next 5 minutes or so.